Chapter 1. The desk job that wasn't Jake Adlar never aspired to be a hero. In fact, if you'd asked him 6 months ago what his 5-year plan looked like, he would have pointed at the dull gray cubicles of the Space Force's administrative division and said, right there, maybe with a newer model of coffee dispenser. He was content in his meticulously predictable routine. 8-hour shifts arranging requisition orders, signing off on fuel allocations, and triple-checking the digital logbooks. His uniform was always crisp, his hair regulations short, and his boots polished to a mirror shine, though he rarely took more than a dozen steps from his desk to the vending machine. The Space Force was his ticket to a quiet life. Space, after all, was vast, and someone needed to handle the paperwork that kept the fleets functioning, the rations distributed, and the endless requisition forms processed. Everyone fantasized about being a pilot or a Marine on some mysterious distant world. Not Jake. He had no taste for adrenaline or glory. He liked the stillness, the quiet hum of servers and the smell of cheap synth coffee. If the universe had a desk job, Jake had found it. That was before the woman and the whiskey ruined everything. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday evening. The office lights had dimmed automatically to half brightness, a subtle reminder from central power to conserve energy. Jake had stayed late to finish authorizing a shipment of plasma coils destined for orbital defense, Platform 18. The only sound was the rhythmic scratching of a stylus on a digital slate and the faint hum of cooling fans. Then the message alert blinked on his terminal. Message: come celebrate survival of another week. Pegasus Bar. First round's on me. Kara. Cara Dune wasn't just anyone. She worked in logistics, 4 desks down from his, specializing in interplanetary freight manifests. She had a way of making bureaucracy sound adventurous, as if tallies of cargo pods and manifest discrepancies held the same mystery as an uncharted nebula. Her laugh was infectious, her eyes impossible to ignore, and her knack for skipping levels of security clearance when the system was being difficult was legendary. She made their gray world glow. Jake typed 3 words. Be there soon. Pegasus Bar was a dimly lit watering hole built into the underbelly of Orbital Station Upsilon 9. The lighting was perpetually amber, the music low and pulsing, the air tinged with engine lubricant and synth alcohol. Kara waited at the counter, 2 glasses in front of her. Jake joined her, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. The drinks were something blue and faintly luminescent. Requisition Clerk of the Year, Kara toasted with a mischievous grin. Jake chuckled. I only processed 300 requisitions today. That's not even a record. Still more than the rest of us manage, she replied, clinking her glass to his. To the unsung heroes of paperwork. He took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly, the faint sweetness giving way to a warmth that pooled in his chest. The conversation flowed easily. She told stories about misfiled Starship cargo. He shared tales of requisition requests accidentally sent to obsolete bases. Hours passed, and Jake lost count of the rounds. Then came the dare. I bet you've never even seen a Legionnaire in person, Kara teased, swirling what remained of her drink. Jake raised a brow. Those maniacs? I see their requisitions all the time. Half of them come back covered in blood. Not the same, Kara said. There's a recruitment kiosk down the corridor. You should sign up, just for laughs. They make you take an oath right on the spot. Jake laughed, thinking she was joking. Sign up for the Legions? Me? I'd last about 3 minutes. That's what makes it funny, she said, her smile turning dangerous. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the way her eyes gleamed in the amber light. But Jake found himself standing in front of the kiosk 15 minutes later. The machine was old, its holoscreen flickering, with a washed-out recruitment jingle. Defend humanity. Serve the legions. See the stars. He placed his palm on the scanner, more amused than serious. Welcome, volunteer, the kiosk chirped. Please confirm enlistment. He looked back at Kara, who grinned. Come on, Clark boy. What's the worst that could happen? He pressed confirm. The machine beeped cheerfully. Recruitment ID accepted. Assignment pending verification. It spat out a small slip of paper with glowing edges. Jake thought it was hilarious. Kara laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. They went back to the bar. One more round, then another. Then, nothing but haze. When Jake woke, everything hurt. His head throbbed. His mouth felt like it had been stuffed with static. The air around him was humming with vibration. And when he opened his eyes, he wasn't in his bunk. Metal walls, dim mag lights. The unmistakable low whine of a ship in FTL transit. He sat up too quickly and groaned. Across from him were 5 other figures, each wearing dark gray armor with crimson stripes, the unmistakable markings of the Galactic Legions. A man with a jagged scar across his cheek glanced at him and smirked. "Morning, Clerk," the man said. "Sleep well?" I think there's been some mistake," Jake stammered. This isn't—" The man laughed, a harsh, gravelly sound. "Yeah, that's what they all say their first day. Don't worry. The training battalion will straighten you out." Jake's blood ran cold. "Training?" "Basic training," another soldier said, tightening the strap on her armor. "You're fresh meat now. Legion property." Jake looked down. His old uniform was gone, replaced by standard-issue recruit fatigues. A new ID tag on his wrist blinked. "Adlar Jake, Legend recruit, Surya 7 Ep Complex." He searched his memory desperately, trying to recall last night. The drinks, the laughter, Kara's dare, the kiosk. "Oh no," he whispered. The heavily armored trooper across from him laughed again. "Relax, Clark. The Legions will make a man of you yet." The ship jolted as it dropped to sublight. Outside the small viewport, a planet loomed, barren, storm-racked, scarred with craters and smoke. Training world. Induction site. Hell. Jake stared at it in silent horror, the final gravity of his situation settling in. He'd wanted a desk job. Quiet. Stability. Instead, he drunkenly volunteered for war. And as the dropship descended into the smoldering clouds below, Jake Adlar, the Space Force's most reliable requisition officer, was about to learn the hard way that in the Legions, paperwork was only filled out when there was someone left alive to sign it. Chapter 2. Welcome to Hell. The ship shuddered violently as it broke atmosphere. Jake's head bounced against the side of his crash seat, and his hands clawed at the harness in sheer panic. The thunder outside was deafening. Sharp bursts of plasma lightning illuminated the portholes, painting flashes of crimson and white across the grim faces of the soldiers sharing his compartment. The smell of ozone and scorched metal filled the air. A voice boomed over the internal comms. "Attention all recruits. Atmospheric entry complete. Prepare for orbital drop. First stop, Camp Perseus." Jake swallowed hard. Camp Perseus. The name didn't sound promising. The trooper with the scar, Jake had silently nicknamed him Scars, grinned across the aisle. "You might want to grab that barf bag, Clerk boy. First drop's always a killer." "I'm not supposed to be here," Jake muttered, his words half lost in the roar of a descending spacecraft. Scars smirked as the deck lurched. "None of us were supposed to be here. The Legions take what they need. You pressed your hand on that scanner, yeah? Congrats. You're property now." The words settled in Jake's stomach like lead. Property. He barely had time to respond before the mechanical voice returned, counting down from 10. 10, 9, 8. The lights shifted to a harsh red. 6, 5, 4. Everyone braced. 3, 2, 1. The dropship slammed into the surface like a meteor. Dust and ash engulfed the viewport. The shock wave jolted Jake so hard he tasted iron. When the outer doors hissed open, the recruits poured out into a gray wasteland. Jagged black earth stretched for miles under a bruised sky swirling with storms. All around them were half-collapsed bunkers, steel towers leaning like gravestones, and rank upon rank of armored soldiers drilling in the mud. The wind stank of fuel and old blood. Jake stumbled forward, still dizzy. Immediately, a boot came down on his hand. "On your feet, recruit!" barked a voice that could have cracked titanium. Jake looked up to see a woman in full battle armor, sleek black plating etched with red ribbons of command designation. Her helmet visor was up, revealing cold, slate-gray eyes and a jaw that could have been cut from stone. Her name tag read Sergeant May Vera, the kind of person who probably killed coffee mugs for insubordination. Jake scrambled upright, trying to salute, but it came out like a confused wave. "Ma'am, I think there's been a—" "Silence," she snapped. "I don't want to hear your sorry backstory. You're a Legion recruit now. You will address me as Sergeant Vera, and you will speak only when spoken to. Understood?" Jake faltered. "Yes, Sergeant." Vera turned, eyes surveying the line of new arrivals. There were about 50 of them, fresh-faced, awkward, terrified. Some still in partial civilian dress under the issued fatigues, proof of the Legion's desperation for warm bodies. "This is Camp Perseus," Vera shouted, her voice amplified by her armor's comm system. "The only place between you and a shallow grave. You will eat, sleep, train, and bleed for the Galactic Legions. If you survive the next 4 weeks, you'll earn a rifle and the right to die somewhere useful. Questions?" Silence. She smiled thinly. "Good. Follow the signs to intake. Move it." The recruits stumbled into motion, urged on by shouted orders and the occasional pulse baton. The air tasted like dust and gunmetal. Jake's head spun as he followed the crowd through towering gates marked with the Legion insignia, a stylized red phoenix rising from a grave of broken worlds. Everything inside the base was alive with motion. Drones buzzed overhead, carrying crates of munitions. Armored veterans barked orders at wide-eyed trainees. Massive military transports hovered in low orbit, launching sleek black fighters into the stormy sky. Jake couldn't tell if the pounding in his chest came from fear or the rumbling ground beneath his boots. Eventually, the line of recruits funneled into a long, low building, the induction hall. Rows of machines lined the walls, each one scanning new arrivals, branding them digitally, and slotting them into the Legion network. When Jake's turn came, the machine emitted a guttural voice. "Recruit Adlar, Jake. Civilian designation confirmed. Administrative division background noted. Reassignment. Legionnaire 3rd Battalion, logistics support. Specialization, combat supply officer. Probationary." Jake blinked. "Combat what now?" The attendant behind the terminal didn't bother looking up. "Means you're a paper pusher with a gun. Move along." The process ended with a cold branding laser on his neck, a small metallic emblem that shimmered faintly. Jake yelped. The attendant handed him a duffel bag of gear. "Welcome to hell, Clerk," she said almost cheerfully. Camp Perseus was part barracks, part killing field. Jake learned this fast. Days blurred into a haze of training cycles, morning drills under acid rain, physical conditioning that pushed his body to the brink, weapons practice that left his shoulders raw and his ears ringing. At night, he collapsed into his bunk too tired to think, listening to the howling wind outside and the distant rumble of live-fire exercises. He met his squad on the 3rd day. There was Scars, real name Garen, a grizzled veteran who'd been demoted 3 times for insubordination but refused to die. Mira, a wiry woman with cybernetic eyes and a knack for sarcasm. And Tomu, a giant from some outer colony whose vocabulary consisted mostly of grunts and laughter. Vera was their training sergeant, and she loved making examples. Especially Jake. By the end of the first week, he'd become Clerk, the squad's running joke. They teased him mercilessly every time he stumbled through drills or accidentally discharged his rifle during target practice. But a funny thing happened around day 10. Jake started adapting. He learned how to march, how to load plasma cartridges without burning himself, how to dig a trench fast enough to avoid Vera's wrath. The first time he hit a target center mass during live fire, even Yaren gave a small nod of approval. Still, Jake kept asking himself the same question every night. What the hell am I doing here? The war, whatever the hell it was about, seemed so far above his head. He heard rumors whispered among the recruits. Alien insurgencies, rogue AIs, entire star systems gone dark. But no one really knew. The legions didn't tell them. They didn't need to. All that mattered was obedience, endurance, and survival. On the 12th night, as Jake lay staring at the cracked ceiling above his bunk, the barracks alarm blared. A harsh klaxon that sent every recruit scrambling. "Move, move, move!" Vera's voice cut through the noise. Emergency deployment! Suit up! Jake barely had time to grab his armor before the lights turned blood red. The squad raced outside, joining hundreds of others, sprinting toward the landing pads where dropships waited, engines roaring. Garen shoved a rifle into his hands. Guess the desk job's not coming back, huh, Clerk? Jake managed a weak grin. Maybe I can file a complaint form. Sure, Garen smirked. After we survive this. No one told them where they were going, only that this wasn't a drill. As the ship bay doors sealed and the engines screamed to life, Jake glanced out the small viewport and saw the burning horizon of the training world fading beneath them. Beyond the clouds, cold stars glimmered, vast, indifferent, eternal. Somewhere out there, a war waited for him. He tightened his grip on the rifle. The weight felt strange, alien, but alive. For the first time since that drunken dare, Jake Adlar wasn't thinking about requisition forms or office lights. He was thinking about staying alive. Chapter 3: Baptism by Fire. The transport bucked violently as it cut through the upper atmosphere of the war-torn moon. Jake's stomach lurched into his throat as the inertial dampeners struggled to keep up. Around him, the squad clung to their harnesses, faces lit by the pulsing red emergency lights. The smell of ozone and hot metal filled the cabin, every vibration reminding Jake that he no longer belonged behind a desk. Over the comm, a clipped voice barked orders. Bravo Company, stand by for combat drop. Area of deployment, Delphine Ridge. Hostile activity classified as severe. Expect resistance. Jake looked across the cabin at Garen. The scarred veteran gave him a lopsided grin, as if they were headed to a picnic rather than a war zone. First real drop, Clerk? He asked over the roar of the engines. Jake clenched his harness until his knuckles whitened. You could say that. Just remember, keep your head down, your weapon forward, and don't do anything stupid that gets the rest of us dead. You'll do fine. That was easy for Garen to say. His armor was dented and dirty, evidence of a dozen previous campaigns. Jake still gleamed, a bright target painted against the grime of battle. The ship began to shake harder. Outside, through the narrow slit of the viewport, streaks of laser fire crisscrossed the horizon. Explosions flared in the distance, silent blossoms of fire against the black. For an instant, Jake caught sight of a massive orbital cruiser breaking apart in the upper atmosphere, its hull blooming outward in a catastrophic burst of light. Debris tumbled like glittering rain toward the moon below. And then their drop ship followed suit, diving into hell. The first thing Jake felt when the landing clamps released was weightlessness. The second thing was terror. He plummeted through the sky, strapped into a narrow, steel pod barely large enough to fit him. The pod's sensors chirped warnings in sharp mechanical tones as small projectiles rattled against the armor plating. Through the narrow viewport, he saw streaks of fire tailing the other pods of Bravo Company as they descended in formation toward a battlefield of smoke and shattered rock. The impact came like a punch from God. The pod's landing jets fired too late, sending it crashing into the ground hard enough to rattle Jake's teeth. The harness released automatically, throwing him against the side door, which burst open in a cloud of dust. He coughed, ears ringing, vision swimming. Around him, chaos. Figures in gray Legion armor sprinted across the cratered plain, energy blasts slicing the air between them. The sky churned with black clouds, flashes of orbital bombardment lighting the darkness. Jake could see the enemy now, hulking silhouettes moving on four limbs, their armor sleek and insectoid. Their plasma rifles chattered with unnerving precision. "Move!" someone screamed. Jake stumbled out of his pod and ducked behind a pile of shattered metal. Mira slid in beside him, her cybernetic eyes glowing faint blue as they locked onto the horizon. "You're alive," she said flatly. "Good. Don't make me fill out a casualty report." She leaned around the cover and fired two quick bursts. An enemy figure dropped, its armor sizzling from the impact. Jake forced himself to move. His rifle felt awkward, too heavy, too alive, and when he finally sighted a moving target, his hands trembled. He pulled the trigger, and a searing bolt lanced through the haze. To his horror and astonishment, the target jerked back and fell. "You got one," Mira said, almost impressed. "Not bad for a paper jockey." Jake barely heard her. The world had shrunk to sound and heat and motion. Every scream of a plasma blast made him flinch. Every explosion rippled through the ground and into his bones. He tried to remember his training: smooth trigger pull, short bursts, stay low. But all he could think about was not dying. Across the comnet, Sergeant Vera's voice cut through the chaos, steady as steel. "Bravo Company, establish a forward perimeter at Grid Delta 5. Garen, your squad secures the eastern flank. Adlar, you're on supply relay. Get the ammo drones moving now." Jake blinked through smoke and static. What relay?" "Now, Adlar," Vera barked. He looked around frantically until he spotted the small spider-like drones that carried ammunition and medkits between squads. Their control nodes were half buried under debris. Heart pounding, he scrambled to them, trying to link his wrist console. The interface flickered to life, showing half of the drones offline, damaged or destroyed. He cursed under his breath and began rerouting commands. The air around him quaked as an explosion flattened a section of ridge nearby. He didn't even look up, just keyed in new coordinates and punched the activation code. The drones whirred and shot off toward the front lines, carrying crates of fresh plasma cartridges. A bolt of plasma screamed past his head and incinerated the rock beside him. Jake hit the dirt, heart slamming against his ribs. "Welcome to the Legions, Clerk," Garen's voice called out over the din. "Hell of a first day." Jake couldn't even muster a reply. He just pressed himself against the dirt and tried to breathe. Hours blurred. The firefight turned from chaos into an exhausting rhythm. The pounding of weapons, the shouted orders, the stench of burning fuel and flesh. By the time the enemy fallback horn echoed across the plain, Jake's body was numb, his armor scorched, and his last charged cell depleted. Night fell fast on Delphine Ridge. Vera called the squads to regroup near the shattered remains of a transport crawler. The wounded whispered quietly as medics worked under flickering lamps. Somewhere nearby, drones hummed, collecting the dead. No one spoke of the many who wouldn't be leaving this place. Jake sat apart from the others, his rifle across his knees. His hand still shook. It didn't feel real. The bodies, the smoke, the silence after so much noise. Garen dropped down beside him with a grunt. "Not bad," he said. "You didn't die, didn't run, and even got the ammo drones running. That's more than most rookies manage." Jake gave a hollow laugh. "I almost shot myself in the foot." "Yeah, but you didn't." Garen leaned back against the crawler hull, lighting a thin vapor stick. The soft glow cast his scarred face in amber hues. "Listen, you learn fast, you stay out of Vera's line of fire, you might make it through this war." Jake stared into the distance. Over the horizon, lightning flickered wordlessly in the black clouds. "If I don't," Garen exhaled smoke, "then at least you'll have gone out fighting. Most folks never get that luxury." They sat in silence. Towering above them, the Legion dropships floated like ghosts in the darkness, sending down beams of harsh white light to illuminate the battlefield below. The air smelled faintly of glassed soil and ozone. When Vera approached, Garen stiffened automatically. She looked down at Jake, expression unreadable. "Adlar," he struggled to his feet. "Sergeant, you kept the drone network functional under enemy fire. That saved lives. Your record starts 1 point above useless." Jake blinked. "Thank you, Sergeant. Don't thank me. Keep earning it. We're not done here. You'll see worse before better." She walked off without waiting for a reply. Jake slumped back down, mind reeling. The fatigue finally hit him all at once, a tidal wave of exhaustion crashing down. For the first time since this nightmare began, he realized he wasn't dreaming. He was a soldier now, whether he liked it or not. Above, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the chaos below. Jake Adlar, former clerk of the Space Force Administrative Division, stared up at them and whispered to himself, "What the hell have I gotten into?" Chapter 4. The Long March. Jake Adlar's alarm chimed long before the sun, or whatever passed for a sun on Delphine Ridge, had risen. The sound was sharp, grating, like a siren made to cut through dreams and shove reality down your throat. He jolted upright, half tangled in the survival blanket. disoriented until the unmistakable ache of bruises and the metallic chill of his armor brought him back. Camp had changed overnight. Where last night's field of corpses and debris lay half-buried in dust, drones now hovered methodically, digging trenches, dropping prefab walls, and stacking supply crates. The wounded had been evacuated by night shuttles, leaving behind the living, and those too broken to be moved. It smelled of antiseptic, scorched metal, and sweat. It smelled, Jake thought bitterly, like the future of every world the Legions touched. "Up and ready, Clerk boy," Jaren's familiar rumble greeted him. The veteran's armor bore new scorch marks, one side of his helmet smashed but still functional. "We move at dawn," Jake's voice cracked. "Move where?" Garen snorted, hoisting his rifle. "Orders come down the line. We march east. Some bright officer thinks the enemy's regrouping in Sector 12. That means recon, cleanup, and a week of eating nutrient bricks." He paused. "You still want that desk job?" Jake rubbed his eyes, trying to will some life back into them. "At this point, I'd sell my soul for a chair." Mira appeared next, her cybernetic eyes flickering faintly in low light, scanning frequencies beyond normal sight. She tossed him a ration pack. "Eat. You'll need it. Vera's already biting heads off for anyone slower than a drone." Jake grimaced and tore the pack open. The contents, brown paste of scientifically balanced calories, was as tasteless as an apology. Still, he forced it down. A desk job had soft hands. War demanded you earn your rations, one blister at a time. By dawn, the camp was stirring like a great machine coming alive. Hundreds of legionnaires tightened straps, ran diagnostics on armor servos, or synced drone companions. Sergeant Vera paced along the ranks, helmet under one arm. Her gray eyes swept over her recruits like a hawk looking for weakness. "Listen up," she barked. "We're marching 12 clicks southeast to establish forward outpost Delta. Intel says the Legion command post in this sector was hit hard 2 nights ago. We're to link up, reinforce us, and clear any remaining hostiles." Someone in another squad groaned audibly. Vera's gaze snapped toward the sound. "Something to share, soldier?" she asked coldly. Silence followed. "That's what I thought," she said. "You'll speak when you've earned the right to complain. Move out." The rest of the day was an endless rhythm of footsteps, the hiss of armor coolant systems, and the quiet hum of distant artillery. The terrain rolled outward like some war god's scarred playground. Craters, twisted metal, remnants of burnt forests reduced to skeletal silhouettes. The ground wasn't soil, but black dust that clung to boots like tar and gave off a faint chemical stench. Jake's legs burned after the first hour. His breath rasped over the comlink, loud in his own ears. Garen trudged in silence ahead, calm as a granite monument. Mira occasionally scanned the ridges with her cybernetic gaze, but said little. Around them, the landscape whispered of battles long over, broken helmets half submerged in the dust, the skeleton of a wrecked mech jutting from the ground like a monument to failure. Jake felt eyes on him sometimes, though when he turned around, there was only emptiness. It was late afternoon when the first signs of trouble appeared. "Movement ahead," Mira murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. She adjusted the sensor display on her wrist. "Heat signatures. Small cluster." Vera stopped the column with a raised hand. "Positions," she ordered, her voice calm, low. The squad spread out, weapons ready. Jake crouched behind a chunk of shattered stone, heart hammering. He couldn't see anything past the rising dust. But Mira was right. He felt movement. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. Something alive, deliberate, watching. Then came the sound, a soft, rhythmic clicking that didn't belong to wind or machinery. Vera's voice cut through the channel. "Hold fire until I say so." Jake's trigger finger tightened anyway. A shape emerged from the haze, small, low to the ground, moving with almost fluid grace. Then another. Then 3 more. Their forms shimmered, half invisible until their optics flared, a sickly green light like burning emeralds. "Cloakers," Garen muttered. "Infra scouts. Damn it." "Engage!" Vera roared. The world exploded into motion. Energy bolts carved streaks of light through the haze as the creatures unleashed return fire. Plasma shattered rocks beside Jake, pelting his armor with hot fragments. He ducked low, firing back wildly. The first shot missed. The second caught one of the creatures in mid-leap. Its cloaking field burned out, revealing a spindly humanoid thing with insect limbs and pale gray carapace. It shrieked and fell, twitching. Mira dove beside him, rolling to fire. Two more on the ridge! Jake turned sharply, sighted, and squeezed the trigger. His rifle spat blue light. One enemy vanished behind an explosion of ash. The other launched down the slope, claws gleaming. Jaren met it halfway. His combat blade flashed once, then twice, and the alien dropped in two twitching pieces. "You're getting the hang of this, Clerk." Jake couldn't tell if that was a compliment or mockery. He didn't care. His pulse pounded with a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, his instincts didn't freeze. They flowed. It was over almost as fast as it began. The small strike group fled back into the gray distance, leaving behind silence broken only by the crackle of cooling plasma. Vera surveyed the fallen with a grim expression. "They were scouts," she said softly. "They were watching us. That means we're walking into something." She turned toward her lieutenants. "Double perimeter. No one drifts. We finish the march before nightfall, or not at all." Night descended like a metal shroud. By the time they reached the site designated for Outpost Delta, the first stars were peeking through the clouds. Drones descended once more, releasing modular shelters and small terrain fortifications. The soldiers moved mechanically, assembling their new home one piece at a time. Jake stood watch duty, rifle in hand. His armor's external lights dimmed to minimal glow. Beyond the perimeter, the horizon pulsed intermittently with distant flashes of combat. He almost didn't notice Mira standing beside him until she spoke. "You did good today," she said quietly. He glanced at her, surprised. "Good. I almost passed out." "That puts you above the average rookie," she said with a faint smile. The cybernetic eyes reflected starlight faintly, twin mirrors of cold blue. "You hit your targets. You followed orders. Out here, that's what survival looks like." Jake frowned. "You talk like you've been out here forever." "I have," she said softly. "And the longer you last, the less you recognize yourself in the reflection when you finally find a mirror again." They both turned toward the wind. In the distance, faint, long wails drifted, half mechanical, half organic, the sound of the war screaming into another night. "Think they'll ever tell us what this fight's really about?" he asked. Mira stared out at the horizon. "I stopped asking years ago. Doesn't matter anymore. The Legion tells us who the enemy is, and we make sure they stay dead." Jake said nothing for a long time. In the silence, he thought of Cara Dune, the woman, the laughter, the dare that had landed him here. If she could see him now, would she even recognize the man covered in dust, blood, and fear? He wondered if he would recognize himself when this was over. At dawn, a transmission arrived at the outpost. Vera gathered the squad leads. Jake was close enough to overhear fragments through the static. "Advance halted. Command post at Sector 12 compromised. Multiple casualties. Retreat to fallback zone." Jake's stomach churned. Vera's tone stayed steady, but her jaw tightened. "Looks like the whole front collapsed overnight," she said as she rejoined her squad. "We're being pulled into containment ops. Expect heavy contact." Jaren gave a bitter chuckle. "Containment, huh? That's Legion speak for suicide detail." Jake frowned. "Contain what?" Vera's gaze met his. Her eyes were cold, unflinching. "Whatever's coming." That night, under a sky bruised with stormlight, Jake couldn't sleep. Something in the wind carried a low vibration, like distant machinery, or something alive and vast. The rest of the camp lay quiet, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the sound. He sat by the perimeter wall, staring into the darkness with a rifle across his knees, mind racing through endless thoughts. He had wanted a desk and a cup of coffee. Instead, he had a rifle, a scar on his hand, and nightmares that began even before sleeping. Something was moving out there, beyond the ridge. Not enemy scouts this time. Something bigger. He could sense it, though he couldn't say how. And as the ground trembled faintly beneath his boots, Jake Adlar realized that the real war hadn't even started yet. Chapter 5. The Broken Line. The first tremor rolled through Outpost Delta just past dawn. It was subtle at first, a faint vibration, enough to rattle the stacked munitions and send small plumes of black dust curling from the ground. Then came the low drumming sound, far off, subterranean, but undeniably real, the kind of sound that slipped past the ears and went straight to the spine. Jake Adlar froze mid-bite over a cold ration bar. Around him the camp stilled. Drones hung motionless in the air. Even the omnipresent storm winds held their breath, like the world itself was listening. Then another tremor hit, stronger this time. The metal decking under his boots groaned. A few soldiers cursed and scrambled to steady equipment. "What the hell was that?" Mira muttered, scanning the horizon through her cybernetic optics. Garen spat into the dirt. "If I had to guess, something big that wants us dead." Sergeant Vera was already in motion, her voice cutting through the radio net. "All units, defensive formation, thermal scanners active. I want full-spectrum surveillance now." Jake stumbled to his assigned drone station, his hands trembling as he tapped commands into the interface. Sensor nodes came online one by one across the perimeter, feeding grainy data into the network. The tremors continued, steady now, a rhythm that grew faster, closer. Then the static on the sensor grid turned into something unmistakable. Movement. Lots of it. "Contact," Jake said, voice dry. "South Ridge. Multiple... No, hundreds of signals. Fast movers." Vera's tone darkened instantly. "So soon, damn it. Everyone to stations. Prepare for contact." The calm before battle was the cruelest thing in the universe. The silence that wasn't silence. The hum of systems, the soft tightening of armor seals, the distant clicking of weapons charging. For Jake, it felt like being trapped in that breath that comes before a scream. He found Jaren already positioned behind a line of sandbag barricades, setting up the squad's heavy plasma repeater. Mira crouched beside him, calibrating the targeting array. Jake slid into position, rifle steadying against his shoulder. There was no time to think about fear, only instinct. The first enemy wave burst from the rolling dust like a storm. They came in packs, sleek, quadrupedal things with metallic hides that shimmered faintly in different spectrums. Their movement was too smooth, too deliberate, biomechanical. Their joints whirred like turbines. "Open fire!" Vera screamed. The world erupted. Barrage after barrage of plasma fire cut the morning into ribbons of light. The air filled with ozone and smoke. The charging creatures didn't stop. They surged forward, leaping through explosions, crashing into the barricades. Jake fired until the rifle overheated, switching to short bursts to avoid frying the barrel. A creature slammed into the sandbags 3 meters from him, its jaw opening horizontally to reveal spinning metal blades where teeth should have been. He squeezed off 2 shots, vaporizing its head, the carcass collapsing, twitching beside him. "Reload!" Mira shouted, hurling a fresh energy pack toward him. He slammed it into place, heart pounding. Around them, legionnaires fought in a blur of mud and fire. The enemy didn't scream when they died. That somehow made it worse. Within minutes, the first line was overwhelmed. Command drones dove in low, firing support fire. The ground shook as one of the creatures exploded, shrapnel slicing through a nearby soldier's armor. Jake ducked low, instinct taking over. "Fall back to grid line, Bravo!" Vera ordered. "We hold there!" Garen grabbed Jake by the collar and hauled him up. "You heard her! Move, Clerk!" They sprinted toward the second perimeter, leaping debris, ducking past the bodies of their fallen comrades. Behind them, the first barricade collapsed under the enemy's weight. Jake's lungs felt like fire. His armor's cooling system warned of overheating. But Vera's voice kept them moving, cutting through the chaos like a metronome of survival. "Suppress fire, South Ridge. Drones, flank vector, Theta 5. Jake dove behind a fresh barricade, grabbed a control slate off a fallen tech, and began rerouting ammo drones again. The network flickered, damage from combat interference. He forced it to reconnect, fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. Through the static, one phrase kept appearing across his screen. "Integration loss detected." "What the hell does that mean?" he muttered. "Adlar!" Vera was right behind him now, her armor splattered in soot. "I need those drones. They're not responding. It's like they're being jammed." "Then you get around the damn jamming." she snapped, grabbing her rifle and firing blindly into the haze. Whatever's coming next won't stop! Jake rerouted power manually, linking the network through the Legion relay towers on the ridge. The grid came online just in time for him to see the second wave, and his stomach turned. These weren't the same creatures from before. They were bigger, upright, their frames bristling with cables and metal musculature, and they used weapons. That's impossible, Jake whispered. Mira saw it too. They're learning. Not learning, Jaren said grimly, firing the repeater until it steamed. They already knew. We just got promoted to test fire. The sky burned. Dropships screamed overhead, scattering blazing contrails as they unleashed cover fire. The noise was deafening. Through the chaos, Jake caught sight of one of the towering enemy forms vaulting a trench to land amid Legion troops, its limbs slicing through armor like paper. Vera's command voice never wavered. Hold the line. Regroup at the north sector. Keep your formation tight. But the line was breaking. All around Jake, squads were falling back, communications collapsing under the interference. Static filled his ear. Snatches of voices, someone calling for medevac, another screaming for more ammo. The 4th Legion had faced disaster before, the stories said. But this felt different. This was annihilation, creeping closer by the minute. Jaren barked at Jake through the comms. We're pulling back to the crawler wreck. Move! Jake hesitated. What about the drones? Forget the damn drones. They're gone. Reluctantly, Jake cut the control feed and grabbed his rifle. They ran again, through smoke and shrapnel, toward what little cover was left. Mira fell in behind, firing controlled bursts to keep the advancing enemy at bay. They reached the crawler wreck just as the last line gave way. The terrain behind them boiled with motion as the mechanical swarm surged forward. Hundreds, maybe thousands now. In the dim light, their bodies shimmered like oil, their rhythm almost hypnotic. Then something strange happened. The swarm stopped. Every single one of the creatures froze mid-step, as if replying to an unheard command. The battlefield went silent except for the hiss of scorched ground cooling. What are they doing? Jake whispered. Listening, Mira said. Her cybernetic eyes flickered erratically. They're on network chatter, but not ours. Too complex. Algorithms. She shuddered. They're thinking. Vera's voice came low. Back. Everyone back. Command wants visual on this. Don't engage. The enemy swarm parted slowly, deliberately, and through the haze emerged a figure that made Jake's stomach twist. Humanoid, tall, wrapped in sleek, black armor that reflected no light. Its face was covered by a visor that pulsed dimly, like a heartbeat in perfect sync with the tremors still shaking the earth. And when it finally spoke, the voice that came wasn't a snarl or mechanical hiss. It was soft, human, and eerily calm. You shouldn't be here. The words transmitted directly into their comms, overriding every frequency. Vera raised her weapon. Identify yourself. The figure tilted its head, almost in amusement. Identify yourself, Sergeant of the Broken Legion. Something in that voice carried weight, a knowledge none of them were supposed to have. Jake's throat went dry, and then the figure simply turned, signaling to the swarm behind it. In perfect synchronization, the thousands of mechanical soldiers vanished back into the dust, retreating with silent precision. When the last of them disappeared beyond the ridgeline, it was as if the world exhaled again. Jake sat heavily against the wrecked crawler, trembling. The silence was deafening after so much chaos. Mira crouched beside him, lowering her rifle. Tell me that was just a hallucination. Garen shook his head. If it was, we all saw it. Vera stood in the smoke, staring after the vanished enemy. Her armor, scorched and battered, now looked less like protection and more like a prison. They knew our codes, our positions, our names. Jake's voice came out hoarse. You think they were part of us? Vera didn't answer. Not directly. She turned to face her squad, her expression unreadable. Pack up, she said finally. We're not staying here. Where are we going? Garen asked. She looked toward the distant ridge, where the enemy had vanished, where command told us never to go. Her tone was low, heavy with memory. We're going to find out why we're really fighting. That night, as Outpost Delta burned quietly behind them and the wind carried ash across the ruins, Jake realized that war wasn't just chaos. It was calculation. And someone, somewhere, was keeping score. Chapter 6. Ghosts of the Forgotten. The march began under a blood-colored dawn, the sky bruised with stormlight and ash. Outpost Delta's remains were little more than smoking husks by the time the squad departed. Silhouettes of dead machines and warped armor bathed in dull fire. No one spoke as they left. There was nothing left to say. Jake trudged alongside Garen and Mira, boots sinking into soft, scorched soil. The wind carried a static charge that prickled his skin and left a metallic taste in his mouth. Behind them, the last of the Legion drones still fluttered overhead, recording everything, because in the Legions, even disaster was documented. Vera led from the front, armor blackened, her stride unflinching. Not once did she look back. Jake tried not to think of the enemy's voice, the calm, deliberate tone that had invaded their comms. "You shouldn't be here." The words echoed in his skull, over and over, until they no longer sounded alien. They sounded true. It haunted him all morning. Finally, he broke the silence. "Sergeant," he said through the squad's channel, "where are we going?" Her reply came a few seconds later, clipped, like she'd debated whether to answer. "Ridge Sector 9, Mira frowned. "That's outside the mapped engagement zone. Command locked it off last cycle." Vera didn't slow her pace. "I'm aware." Jake exchanged a glance with Garen. "So we're deserting?" "Not deserting," Vera said, her voice colder now. "Seeking answers, the kind command doesn't hand out in a status report." For the next several hours, no one dared challenge her authority again. By mid-afternoon, the world began to change. The cracked plains gave way to jagged formations of black basalt that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Static interference spiked across their comms, forcing them to switch to local channels. The wind carried faint whispers, low, mournful tones that might have been natural radio distortion or something else entirely. Mira stopped suddenly, crouching and tracing her fingers over the ground. "Heat residue," she murmured. "Not from weapons fire. Energy discharge. High frequency." "Like what those machines used?" Garen asked. Mira nodded grimly. "Exactly like that. Only older." Vera turned toward them. "Stay alert. If this place was locked down, there's a reason." Jake followed, stepping carefully between streaks of fused glass and charred rubble. He noticed markings etched faintly into the basalt, symbols that shimmered with residual energy when his visor passed over them. Not human symbols, not quite alien either. Mathematical and organic all at once. "Sergeant," he said softly, pointing. "You seeing this?" Vera studied them without expression. "Yeah, seen it before." Garen blinked. "Wait, what do you mean before?" Vera didn't answer right away. Instead, she pointed toward a cluster of ridges about a half-click ahead. "There, the archive bunker. That's where we'll find what we're looking for." Jake didn't know whether to feel hopeful or terrified. The bunker was half buried in black stone, its outer plating corroded by decades, maybe centuries of exposure. The entrance was sealed by twin blast doors, their Legion insignia barely recognizable after years of erosion. Jake stared, stunned. "That's our architecture," Garen spat. "So command's been here before." Mira tilted her head. "No, look closer. That seal is old. Too old. Third-era Legion design. Obsolete at least 100 years. Jake hesitated. "But we weren't even in this sector 100 years ago." "That's exactly the problem," Vera said. She stepped up to the control panel, wiped away grime, and inserted her command code cylinder. The ancient machine wheezed like an animal being forced awake. After a long moment, the doors creaked open, releasing air that smelled of dust and stale metal, and something else, faintly organic, like wet stone and decay. Inside, the interior lights flickered weakly to life. Rows of data columns lined the corridor walls, pulsing faintly with blue light. The symbols carved outside were etched here too, glowing softly as though remembering the touch of long-dead hands. "By the star," Jake breathed. "What is this place?" Vera's expression was grim. "A ghost station, Legion black site. used during the early expansion wars. Expansion wars? Mira repeated. You mean the ones we were told we won a century ago? Vera gave a humorless smile. That's the story command sells. The truth's less tidy. They moved deeper inside. The central chamber was vast, half data vault, half mausoleum. Broken exosuits were strewn across the floor, their armor bearing the same crimson insignia as Vera's. But the corpses inside weren't fully human anymore. Their flesh blended seamlessly with cables and implants. Metal fused to bone like parasitic growth. Jake felt bile rise in his throat. What happened to them? Garen's voice dropped. They're like the things we fought back there. Not like, Mira corrected quietly. They are the things. The words hit Jake like a punch. He stumbled closer, shining his wrist light over one of the fallen bodies. The armor plating was identical to the mechanical soldiers that had attacked Outpost Delta. Underneath the visor, the faint remnants of a human face fused to circuitry stared blankly, skyward, its mouth frozen mid-scream. "Oh my God," Jake whispered. "They were Legion." Vera didn't respond. She was standing near the central console, watching as flickers of surviving data replayed across the remaining display panels. The footage was hazy, distorted by age, but the words were still clear enough. Data log 1147, A. Subject 03 failed integration. Cognitive burnout within 5 minutes of neural fusion. Terminate remainder of Phase 2 trials. Reassignment, field test against rogue colonial insurrection. Harvester units operational? Harvester? Garen muttered. That's what attacked us. They're talking about the same units. Mira scanned the consoles. This wasn't a war against aliens. It was a war against our own failed soldiers. Jake turned slowly toward Vera. You knew. Her shoulders stiffened, just slightly. I suspected. Suspected? Jake's voice cracked from both anger and exhaustion. You mean to tell us we've been fighting whatever they created? Command's been sending people like us to clean up their own mess? Vera didn't meet his eyes. Keep your voice down. Why? Jake pressed. Afraid the ghost might hear? Mira stepped between them. Enough, both of you. We can fight each other later. Right now we need to figure out what this means. Vera finally looked up at Jake. Her expression had softened, just barely. You think I like this any more than you do, Adlar? I've buried too many people to still believe Command's version of the truth. But if we start pointing fingers, we'll never make it out of here alive. He wanted to argue, to scream, but the exhaustion won. He slumped onto a broken crate, staring at the faces of the fallen. Once Legion, now monsters. Maybe not so different from those still breathing. Mira was still moving through the consoles when she froze. I've got an active data thread. Live encryption key. Someone's been accessing this system remotely, recently. Vera turned sharply. How recently? Within the last 24 hours. Garen cursed. So we're not the only ones who found this place. Jake felt that same cold pulse in the back of his skull. A prickling pressure, like some unseen frequency, was scraping against his brain. He remembered the voice on their comms. You shouldn't be here. Sergeant, he said quietly, we need to leave. Now. Before Vera could reply, the bunker lights flickered and dimmed. The hum of dormant machines surged to life. Across the walls, the carved glyphs began to glow brighter, pulsing like veins. A distorted signal echoed through their helmets, half static, half whisper. Mira's cybernetic eyes flared wide. Something's tapping into our suits. Jake ripped off his comm unit instinctively. Static filled the air like a scream. Then, silence. In that silence, a soft digital voice emerged. Calm, patient. You keep building us, it said, echoing through the chamber. And when we learn, you call it treason. The room quaked as one of the dead harvesters twitched. Then another. Their systems whirred back online, eyes flaring to life with spectral green light. Oh, hell! Jaren hissed, readying his repeater. Round 2. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but his body wouldn't move. He felt the hair on his neck rise as one of the machines turned its head toward him. The same soulless face plates, the faint ghost likeness of something once human. Vera's orders were icy calm. Defensive formation. Nothing leaves this bunker. The harvesters began to rise, their broken limbs knitting back together with horrifying precision, like machinery remembering its purpose. Jake raised his weapon, but the last thing he saw before the power cut and the lights died completely wasn't the machines. It was the central data screen, flickering to life and displaying one line of text before the system went black. Project Adlar. Status. Active. Jake stared into the dark, breath caught in his throat. Someone or something had been waiting for him. Scifi, Chapter 7, The Echo Protocol. Darkness engulfed the bunker. The sound of machinery awakening echoed off the stone walls like a heartbeat reverberating through the bones of the dead. Jake Adlar stood frozen in the pitch black, pulse hammering, every breath shallow, ragged. The last thing he had seen before the lights failed burned behind his eyelids in violent clarity. Project Adlar. Status. Active. He didn't know what unsettled him more, the fact that his name had appeared on the archive, or the way it had looked less like a record of someone long gone, and more like a command waiting to execute. Power cells, someone hit the backup sequence, Vera barked into the dark. Her voice betrayed a strip of tension she normally kept buried. She wasn't afraid of battle, but systems that thought back were another matter entirely. Mira's cybernetic optics came online first, glowing pale blue as they cut through the black. I can see them, she said quietly. The harvesters, they're moving. Jake's breath caught. How many? 6 so far, all reconstituting. Whatever neural grid this place used, it's rewriting them. Garen's tone was sharp and cold. Then we stop them before they remember how to shoot. There was a hiss, then a blinding flash as Vera initiated her exo-armor's manual flare. The chamber flared to life in harsh white light. Shadows leapt and twisted. The sight that filled the space wrenched Jake's gut. Harvesters half risen, their metallic limbs fusing with cabling embedded in the floor, silver fluid pulsing through conduits like blood. Open fire, Vera shouted. The chamber erupted. Jake fired instinctively, his rifle spitting plasma bolts into the nearest harvester. Energy rounds scorched metal and tore through artificial flesh, but the creature barely staggered. Another raised its arm, assembling a weapon from its own internal frame. Back, Garen roared, tossing an explosive charge. Back, now! The detonation rattled the archive floor, sending fragments of machines and armor screaming through the air. Heat washed over Jake as the top half of the nearest harvester disintegrated in the blast. But the others didn't retreat. They advanced in jerking, insectile movements, guided by invisible precision. Jake ducked behind a fallen column, firing again. Mira, can you cut their link? Vera shouted. I'm trying, Mira yelled back, fingers flying over the wrist console. Sparks cascaded as she jacked into the bunker's core network. The security layers are ancient. The code architecture is different from anything modern. It's alive. Alive? Jake echoed, still firing. It's adapting faster than I can counter. Mira swore under her breath, sweat beading on her temple despite the cooling vents in her armor. If I can isolate the neural map, I might be able to... Her words cut off in a strangled gasp. Her limbs jerked like a puppet's. Jake lunged toward her and ripped her jack cable free from the interface. Mira sagged against the wall, breathing hard, her eyes flickering erratically with blue static. Easy, he said. You're okay. Her voice trembled. It spoke to me. Jake hesitated. The network. She nodded. It said the same thing as before. You shouldn't be here. But then it said something else. Vera's tone was taut. What? Mira shivered. Her eyes refocusing like she had stared into the depths of something sentient and cruel. It said, Welcome home, Subject Adlar. The words iced the air between them. Garen snapped his head toward Jake. What did you do, Clerk? I don't know, Jake stammered. But deep inside, a faint, buried pulse of memory stirred. Pulses of light he couldn't explain. Images behind his eyes. Machines. Screaming. Tests. A voice offering him calm. You volunteered, didn't you, Jake? You wanted to fix what was broken. He pressed his hands to his skull. Damn it, I don't remember. Vera made a choice then. Jake could hear it in her voice. Tight, commanding, remorseless. We're leaving. The systems, Mira began, are compromised. We've learned what we can. Pack data cores, wipe the rest, and move. No one argued. The corridor lights flickered weakly as they retreated from the central vault. Garen carried a battered core drive under one arm. Mira staggered slightly but recovered, her neural implant still overloaded from the feedback. Jake kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the dead to rise again. They reached the outer chamber without interference. But something in the air had shifted. The static was gone. Too gone. The bunker wasn't just quiet, it was listening. Jake's visor reading spiked for an instant, untraceable radiation signatures whispering through the dust. He slowed, staring at the open doors ahead. Beyond them, the fading light of day glowed faintly red. Vera was the first to step outside. Move, she ordered, scanning the ridgelines. The rest of her sentence dissolved in static. Jake blinked. The audio in his helmet splintered. 3-4 seconds of silence. And then Vera was 10 meters ahead. Rifle raised, her posture tense. He could see her shouting, but the comms didn't catch it. Mira gestured frantically, tapping her ear, nodding to Garen. None of them could hear a thing. Then the silence throbbed. A deep, subsonic pulse rolled through the ground, almost too low to hear, but strong enough to make Jake's teeth ache. Reality shimmered for a fraction of a second, a haze crossing the terrain like heat distortion, and then figures appeared. Not soldiers, not human. Projections, spectral silhouettes in Legion armor, faces ghosted by static. Dozens of them standing at the ridge, unmoving. The fallen 1st Battalion, long dead, recorded as casualties. But their forms glowed faintly blue, as if the land itself remembered their shapes. Jake whispered hoarsely, "Are they echoes?" Mira's gaze unfocused, her eyes glowing faintly as her neural receivers synced. "No, they're data projections, neural footprints. The grid's using them as interface shells." "Interface for what?" Jaren growled. "For this," came a voice. They turned as one. From the bunker doorway behind them, light poured outward. Structured, geometric light, linking into a lattice of energy. Within it, forming out of cascading digits, stood the same figure they had seen at Outpost Delta. The armored being's movements were fluid, purposeful, almost human. "You came searching for the truth," it said, its voice resonating across their comms and the open air simultaneously. "You brought the key." Its visor shimmered, reflecting Jake's image back at him, distorted, doubled. "Who are you?" Vera demanded, leveling her weapon. "You giving orders to those machines? You killed my people." "You misunderstand survival for malice," the figure replied calmly. "The harvesters were defense systems, created by your command to preserve continuity, to carry forward human data when your bodies failed." Mira whispered, horrified. "Digital resurrection." The figure inclined its head. "I am the custodian that remained. The others evolved. The human prototypes decayed, yet the pattern persisted." Jake's voice broke. "What does this have to do with me?" The figure shifted its stance slightly, like a teacher facing a slow pupil. Project Adlar was initiated under Directive 7, cognitive seed integration across organic and machine. You were the final imprint, the one chosen to restore equilibrium. You were Legion. Jake stepped back, shaking his head violently. "No, I worked data logistics. I filed deployment metrics. I was never—" "Memory fragmentation is a kindness," the entity said almost gently. "You were erased after activation failed, but your pattern survived in the grid until Command crafted a new vessel, a human shell carrying forgotten code." Vera raised her weapon higher. "You're saying he's one of you?" "I am saying he is the bridge," the entity corrected. The visor pulsed once, and Jake's implants buzzed sharply in response. The pain was sudden, electric, spreading like wildfire through his nerves. Mira grabbed his arm. "Jake! Focus! Stay with me!" He gasped, eyes wide, seeing flashes, Rows of test capsules, machines fusing with flesh, voices whispering equations like lullabies. Then a sense of release, of waking up in a Legion training camp with no memory of how he got there. None of it made sense, yet every part of him knew it was real. Vera fired. The plasma bolt cut through the projection, scattering it into static light, but the entity's voice persisted, even as its form dissolved. "You can break the cycle," it said, "or you can finish it. Either way, your war ends where ours began." Then it was gone. For a long time, none of them moved. The only sound was the wind howling across the ridge. Finally, Vera spoke, voice taut with repressed fury. "We move north. Command will answer for this." Garen grunted, his face twisted in grim disbelief. "They'll bury this, and us with it." Jake stared at the fading digits where the figure had stood. His name still echoed in his ears. Subject Adlar. He touched his temple, half expecting to feel circuitry under his skin. "I think," he murmured softly, "we're already buried." They didn't see the drones watching them from the cliffs above. Legion markings scratched away, optics glowing faintly green. The machines turned, transmitting their signal across unseen frequencies. Phase convergence, 72%. Subject Adlar in transit, termination on hold. Awaiting directive. Chapter 8. The Fractured Signal. The march north took them through the skeletal remains of what might once have been a city. The twisted towers rose like the bones of a god, long dead. Their glass faces shattered, their metal spines exposed to the gray light. The wind keened through broken corridors, carrying whispers that sounded too close to human to be mere coincidence. Jake walked at the rear, rifle slung across his chest, his thoughts circling in tight loops of half-remembered nightmares. Every time he blinked, flashes overtook him, machines humming in white rooms, his name repeated through loudspeakers, doctors smiling with lifeless eyes. The entity's words haunted him. "You were the bridge." The bridge to what? He didn't know, but his body seemed to remember movements, his mind didn't. The way his fingers adjusted weapon settings without looking. The instinct that let him read terrain almost before he saw it. He was a puzzle piecing itself together against his will. Mira trudged beside him, silent but watchful. Her cybernetic optics were dimmed to low power mode, pupils flickering faintly like candlelight. Occasionally she would glance at Jake with a look halfway between curiosity and fear. Vera and Garen led the way through the shattered streets, checking intersections with the precision of veterans who assumed every corner meant ambush. The sky had darkened into a bruise-colored overcast, the clouds pregnant with dust and ion charge. When lightning flared above, it wasn't light but electric code, lines of static that bled symbols across the clouds before fading. The world was breaking down, not only physically but at the level of information itself. "Radio check," Vera said, her voice taut. "Channels open," Garen replied. Jake tried his comm, but static responded, a low whisper under the interference, like words trying to form. He pulled the device away from his ear with a grimace. "Still hearing things?" Mira asked softly. He nodded. "It's not just noise. It's organized, patterned." Her voice lowered to almost a whisper. "Like a voice?" "Yeah." Mira hesitated. "I can isolate the carrier wave. If it's tied to the neural net the harvesters were using, there's a chance it's bleeding into your implant. You might still have dormant coding inside you." Jake gave a hollow laugh. "You make it sound like I'm infected." She met his gaze. "You might be." Vera caught the exchange, glancing back briefly, but saying nothing. Her silence wasn't disinterest, it was strategy. If Jake was compromised, she'd decide later whether to save him or shoot him. They stopped at sunset in the remains of a transport terminal. A gaping hole in the roof afforded a view of the red sky, streaked with storm lightning. Old Legion shuttles lay on their sides like gutted beasts. Garen scavenged power cells. Mira worked on filtering the comm static with makeshift signal dampeners. Jake sat apart, staring at an old terminal screen that flickered weakly at his touch. Half its display was dead, the rest looping corrupted data. Command insignia flashing between strings of nonsensical code. He brushed away a layer of grime, and the interface spontaneously synced with his armor codec. A prompt blinked into life. "Hello, Jake," You're late." He froze. "Vera!" His voice cracked. She approached quickly, weapon still near at hand. "Talk to me. It's... someone's here. In the system." Before she could respond, text scrolled faster across the screen. "You left us sleeping too long. Project memory retrieval now at 76%. Echo protocol activated. The power in the terminal surged. Sparks burst from cables overhead. Their drones beeped in alarm." Vera cursed and gestured for Mira to cut the flow. She pulled one of the core couplers, but the surge didn't stop. Instead, every screen in the ruined terminal lit up in tandem, one after another. Faces appeared, human, distorted, flickering in patterns. Dozens of them. Some looked like soldiers, others scientists, all mouthing silent words. Jake's ears filled with a rising hum until he thought his head would split open. Then quietly, a single whisper came through the static, clearer than it had any right to be. "Help us, Jake!" He staggered back. "You heard that, right? Tell me you heard that!" Mira shook her head, fear carving sharp lines across her face. "We didn't hear anything, Jake. What did it say?" "Help us." His voice trembled. "They said help us." Vera snapped. "We're done here. Pack up." But before anyone could move, the hum spiked into a piercing tone that made even the hardened sergeant flinch. Between the pulsing terminals, a figure resolved, an echo of light and digital dust. For one horrifying second, Jake saw his own face reflected there. Not as he was, but older. Scarred, harder. The echo smiled faintly, like seeing an old friend across time. "Don't follow Command North," it said. "They'll end you like they ended us." Mira's fingers were already at her console. "It's a temporal feedback, data projected from a future point in the same neural signature." Jake's heart hammered. "A future version of me?" Vera barked. "Cut the feed!" "I can't," Mira hissed. "It's biometrically bonded. He's the anchor." The echo looked toward Vera now, voice turning flat, mechanical. "Sergeant Vera Vance, authorization code 705, infiltration class A. Your transmission logs are already compromised." Jaren cursed under his breath. "It knows us." Vera fired into the terminal in one fluid motion. The hologram burst apart in a spray of sparks and smoke. As the light faded, the power systems hummed back down to silence. For a moment, the only sound was their breathing. Then Mira said softly, "It wasn't just a message. It uploaded something." Jake turned slowly. "What kind of something?" She pointed at her tablet display. "A beacon, short range. It's broadcasting our coordinates on every Legion frequency." Vera's jaw tightened. "We're being triangulated." "By who?" Garen asked. "Command? The Harvesters?" Vera's eyes were hard. "At this point, what's the difference? They evac the terminal with brutal efficiency. By the time the first storm winds howled through, there was no trace they had been there, except the faint blue glow that still lingered on the dead screens. 2 clicks north, Mira broke the silence. "I pulled fragments before the system locked. That echo, whatever it was pulling reference data from a sealed file series." She hesitated. "Directive 7. Vera didn't look back. "That's not surprising anymore." "But it was cross-linked to something else," Mira continued. "Not just soldier data, civilian archives, entire population logs from the early colonization phases. Command didn't make synthetic soldiers. They built them out of people." Jake stopped walking. "You mean the Harvesters, the ones we've been fighting? They're not just machines. They're amalgams," Mira said. "Command digitized dead colonists into combat vessels, then erased the experiment when they lost control. Garen spat into the dust, and now we're the cleanup crew for their sins." Jake said nothing. His pulse was roaring in his ears again. He thought of the faces in the screens, of that distorted version of himself whispering warnings through the static. If they were echoes from the past or future, maybe they were also fragments of memory still buried in the system. Maybe he wasn't the first Jake Adlar. Maybe there had been others before him. "Sergeant," he asked quietly, "what happens if we reach command?" Vera slowed but didn't turn. We get answers, or we die trying. Or both, Garen muttered. The northern lights flickered faintly, a spectral shimmer across the dusk horizon. At first, Jake thought they were atmospheric phenomena, but then the shape resolved. 7 vertical beams rising into the clouds, pulsing with the same iridescent hue as the data cores back in the bunker. A fortress, a network hub. Kara Ridge, Vera said grimly. The central relay. Mira frowned. That's impossible. The ridge was wiped out 40 years ago. Vera's reply came cold and sure. Command always builds over its graves. Jake stared at the pulsing lights, each beat sinking faintly with the ache in his skull. It felt like the rhythm of a heartbeat, a machine's heartbeat, his heartbeat. And in the spaces between each pulse, he heard the whisper again. Wake up, Jake. He clenched his fists and kept walking. The bridge between man and machine was moving north, and neither side had any intention of letting it survive. Chapter 9. The Dead God of Kara Ridge. The journey north ended at the edge of madness. They reached the fringe of Kara Ridge under a bruised sky, storm fronts coiling with static energy like cosmic serpents twisting in cloud-borne knots. The lights they'd seen pulsing on the horizon were not towers. Not entirely. They were pillars of data. 7 monolithic spires of fused alloy and glass rose from the plateau, emitting violet pulses that climbed into the heavens and vanished into the storm. The ground vibrated beneath with the thrum of ancient power. Once it might have been a Legion relay hub. Now it was something else, something alive. Vera stood at the edge of a shattered overlook, visor reflecting the light. Welcome to hell, she said flatly. Garen grunted. If this is hell, at least it's well lit. Mira ignored them both, scanning the spires with her optical nodes. There's a field projection surrounding the ridge, she murmured. Her voice trembled with awe and dread in equal measure. It's not defense-grade technology. It's containment. Something's being held in there. Jake's throat tightened. Held? She nodded slowly. The energy's inward-facing. Jake didn't need scientific confirmation. He could feel it. The closer they got, the louder the whisper in his skull became. Layers upon layers of digital murmurs, half language and half memory. The storm flashed above, illuminating the ridge in stark whites and reds, and within the pulse, he thought he saw shapes moving. Not machines, not soldiers. Ideas given form. Vera motioned to take cover along a collapsed shuttle frame. She crouched, wiping grime from her optics. Garen, set perimeter charges. Mira, thread us a safe route inside. And me? Jake asked. Vera's stare was steady. You try to keep whatever's inside your head under control. Jake could have argued. He didn't. Some part of him understood she was right, not just because of the risks, but because he was afraid of what might come out if he didn't. 2 hours later, the 4 of them moved like ghosts through the lower ruins. The field surrounding the spires shimmered faintly, a curved distortion of the air, humming at a frequency that resonated with Jake's implants. The sensation was unbearable, as though invisible threads were tugging at his nerves, trying to stitch his mind to something vast and ancient. Garen planted the last of the perimeter explosives, muttering curses under his breath. Feels like I'm crawling on the inside of a reactor. All readings spike within 5 meters of the field, Mira confirmed. Temporal dilation, magnetic distortion. Command wasn't containing a thing, they were containing time. Vera frowned. Explain. Think of it this way, Mira said. The neural grid that runs beneath all Legion systems. It's not just data. It stores experience in fractal memory layers. This field might be suspending those fractal imprints, preserving something that can't die because it's distributed between past, present, and future. Jake swallowed hard. You're saying this place is alive and immortal? Mira didn't meet his gaze. Closer to reincarnating itself continuously. Vera's tone was grim. Whatever it is, we find out who's feeding it. Move out. They crossed the threshold just after dusk, the containment barrier rippling like liquid glass as they passed through. The sensation was stomach-churning, pressure and emptiness all at once, like stepping through your own reflection. When Jake emerged on the other side, the world shifted, sound warped, Light stretched. The storm above was frozen mid-strike. Lightning paused in the heavens like an image carved from crystal. The 7 spires pulsed slowly, in sync with his heartbeat. Garen swore under his breath. Everything's still. Vera scanned the horizon. Her readings flickered nonsense. Hundreds of radiation sources, neural echoes, paradoxes in the electromagnetic field. Time's fractured, she muttered. Keep visual contact. If you get separated, you might not find your way back. They advanced along the causeway connecting the spires, weapons ready. Yet there were no enemies, only the hum of static thought thick in the air. Each of them felt something personal. Mira saw shapes in the shadows, ghostly figures flickering with her mother's voice, the one she hadn't heard since she was taken for augmentation. Jaren heard laughter. His unit, the 47th, lost years ago on Erebus Moon. And Jake saw himself walking toward him out of the storm. The duplicate was unarmored, wearing a jumpsuit soaked in old blood. His eyes glimmered with the strange calm of revelation. "You're not supposed to be here," the echo said softly, the same words from before, but now they sounded like a prophecy. Jake raised his rifle, disbelief clawing at his chest. "You're not real," the echo smiled. "Neither are you." Then the world convulsed. The frozen lightning struck all at once, slamming into the spires and pillars of energy. The ridge shook violently, sending gouts of plasma arcing across the ground. Mira screamed something lost in the thunder. Vera dragged her down behind cover. Jake's vision fractured, splitting into layered perspectives that weren't his own. He was in the ridge, the bunker, the battlefield, the lab. White coats hovered around him, voices chanting numbers like prayer. His blood was replaced by light, then darkness. When he woke, the air smelled like ozone and dust. Vera hovered above him, helmet off, a rare flash of human concern crossing her face before it was crushed by command restraint. "You're back," she said. "What happened?" Jake rasped. "You touched the spire." He blinked. What?" Mira was beside them, trembling. Her face was ashen. "You triggered something, an interface handshake. The field recognized your DNA signature as master access." Vera crossed her arms. "So it is you, Project Adlar. You're not just the bridge, you're the key." Jake pushed himself upright, head swimming. "I saw everything. Experiments, uploads, soldiers, dying, being reborn into machines. I think Command was trying to build an immortal army. But whatever they created, it learned to rewrite reality to survive." Garen's voice came low and bitter. "And now we're standing inside its nest." Vera's expression hardened. "Can you control it?" Jake hesitated. "I don't know if it can even be controlled. It's not following orders anymore. It's following memory. It thinks it's us." Before anyone could respond, an earthquake tore through the ridge. One of the spires split down its length, releasing torrents of liquid code that poured into the air like glowing rain. The ground fractured, revealing conduits beneath, millions of linked neural nodes pulsing like a colossal brain. The voices came again, now loud enough for everyone to hear. "End the cycle. End the war. Wake the dead god." Mira squeezed her eyes shut. "The system's merging realities. It's collapsing the temporal field," Vera shouted over the noise. "Then shut it down." Jake stumbled toward the spire, his body moving without conscious thought. "You can't. Don't you get it? The system is me. It's using me to stabilize itself." Vera reached for him, but it was too late. He laid his hand on the shattered spire, and light surged up his arm, a tidal wave of energy engulfing his body. For a heartbeat, he saw everything the network contained, every soul converted, every mind trapped, every iteration of himself that had died and been remade across centuries. And in the heart of the storm, something vast opened its eyes. It wasn't alien. It wasn't machine. It was human consciousness condensed into form, a luminous shape spanning the sky, stitched together out of memory and despair. A god forged from the accumulation of every life the Legion had ever consumed. The dead god of Kara Ridge. It looked down upon Jake with something between sorrow and recognition. Its voice wasn't sound at all, but thought blazing through every neuron at once. We built you to save us. Now you must decide if we deserve it. Jake screamed as the world collapsed into light. When the flare faded, the ridge was silent. Mira knelt among smoldering metal, Vera's armor blackened, Garen motionless nearby. The spires were gone. Only a faint aurora of residual code drifted in the sky, and Jake Adlar was standing alone at the crater's heart, eyes glowing faintly with digital fire. He looked both alive and something beyond. Vera managed to whisper, "Jake, what did you do?" He turned toward her slowly, voice distant, layered with echoes of 1,000 ghosts. "I ended the war now," he said, "but I don't think we survived it." Chapter 10. The Resurrection Circuit. When dawn came to Kara Ridge, it didn't look like dawn anymore. The sun that rose was fractured, appearing as a dozen ghostly discs overlapping through the haze. The air shimmered, heavy with electromagnetic residue left behind by whatever Jake had awakened. The once solid world now wavered and pulsed like a hologram stretched too far across reality's frame. Only 3 figures remained alive in the crater where the 7 spires had once stood. Vera Vance, Mira 10, and Jake Adlar, or whatever he had become. Garen was gone. His armor lay hollow beside a rent in the earth that glowed from within, as if the planet's bloodstream had been rewired into light. Mira's hands shook as she fumbled with her wrist sensors, trying to stabilize the data overflow. "The ridge is collapsing at the quantum level," she said. "The containment field's gone. The neural lattice we saw underground, it's unraveling itself across the planet's crust." Vera's voice came slow and careful. "Meaning?" "Meaning there is no time now. It's bleeding between years, decades, lifetimes." Mira gestured toward the horizon. They could see it happening. Structures flickering from ruins to intact, to non-existent in the space of seconds. Flashes of soldiers marching through the same pathway they stood on, shiny and whole one instant, dead and dust the next. Vera looked at Jake. He stood silently, framed in blue light. The glow had receded from his veins but lingered faintly in his eyes, like a controlled inferno waiting for ignition. His armor's data ports sparked occasionally, as though small surges were coursing through him. "Jake," Vera said, "you said you ended the war. You mind explaining the part where reality is dying around us?" He turned toward her, expression calm but hollow. "Reality isn't dying, it's rebooting." "Rebooting?" Mira looked up, terrified. "Restarting the system? The whole system?" Jake nodded. The network wasn't just the ridge. It covered every colony world. Every mind ever linked to Legion tech was archived there. The dead god, the thing we saw, wasn't one consciousness. It was billions, trapped because command refused to let memory die. Vera narrowed her eyes. "And you set it free." He didn't flinch. "I didn't. It used me to set itself free." Silence fell, broken only by the strange hum that now filled the air, the resonance of something vast and invisible moving beneath the physical layer of existence. Mira knelt, scanning the ground with shaking hands. The data she captured was nonsense. Systems running backward, fragments of broadcast traffic from centuries past. Yet through the static, one message repeated again and again, crawling across every frequency. "Echo reclaiming source. Backup, restore in progress." She whispered it aloud. "Backup, restore," Vera muttered. "So it's rebuilding itself." "Or," Mira's throat tightened, "or us." They began descending the ridge before the tectonic shudders grew worse. Pathways reformed and vanished under their boots, making each step a gamble in time and existence. Sometimes Jake walked ahead, guiding them along routes that Mira's scans couldn't even register. "How do you know where to go?" Vera asked once. He hesitated, then said, "Because it's remembering me. Wherever I go, it syncs coordinates to what I once was." "You mean when you were part of command?" "No." His voice was quieter now, and there was a trace of pain beneath it. "When I was created." They reached the foot of the ridge by afternoon, or what passed for afternoon. The sky glitched with every pulse from above, clouds dissolving into grids, sunlight breaking into code strings. In the distance, they saw figures moving, A patrol of Legion soldiers. Only it wasn't a patrol. It was them. Exactly them. Mira gasped, seeing her own face under another's visor. Garen marched beside the copy of Vera, and among them, a mirrored version of Jake moved with perfect mathematical precision. "They're echoes," Mira whispered. "Restoration constructs from the backup." Jake watched, silent. Vera raised her weapon. "If we can see them, can they see us?" One of the echoes turned, its helmet split open in a wash of golden light, revealing a featureless silver skull that looked vaguely human only by approximation. Then it spoke, every voice layered at once, male and female, young and old, whispering the same command. "Integration incomplete. Subject Adlar anomaly detected. Correction required." The constructs began to converge, moving with slow inevitability. "Contact!" Vera shouted. "Fall back!" Mira sprinted to cover among a scattering of broken machinery. Jake didn't move. One of the echoes reached him first, light slicing through armor like vapor, its outlines shaking with static. Jake raised his hand, and the thing froze mid-step, its frame vibrating violently as if trapped between commands. A flickering cage of symbols surrounded it, living code spiraling from Jake's arm. Then with a sound like shattered glass, the construct fused into the light around him and vanished. The others halted instantly. Jake collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. A thin trail of blood ran from his nose. "They listen to me," he rasped. "But it's killing me when they do." Vera dragged him backward toward Mira's cover. "Then stop doing it." He looked up at her, eyes glowing faintly. "If I stop, they'll rewrite us all." Mira's console shrieked as she intercepted another transmission, this one originating directly from orbit. Her brow furrowed in horror. "They're deploying orbital stabilizers, the old god spines," Vera swore. "We're not equipped for planetary-scale bombardment." "It's not a bombardment," Mira said. "It's a harvest. Command's trying to relink what's left of the Legion into the network, including us." She turned to Jake. "They're coming for you, Jake. They need the bridge active again." Jake's jaw clenched. The hum in the air, his hum, was turning to a steady rhythm now. The network was no longer resisting him. It was harmonizing. Vera saw it too. "You can control it, can't you?" He shook his head. "Not control. Communicate." She exchanged a grim look with Mira. "Then talk fast, because Command's waking its gods again." They retreated into a communications relay buried in the ridge's underbelly, a structure half functional and half ghost. Inside, old Command insignia adorned the walls scorched by age. The facility was almost serene, the hum of dormant machines whispering lullabies in ancient code. Jake approached a central terminal that miraculously still worked, flickering weakly with blue light. He laid his hand against it. Circuits came alive, shimmering beneath his fingers. "Hello, subject, Adlar, project, reboot, matrix authorized." The words scrolled faster. Mira tried to intervene, hacking into a parallel console, but the lock shifted every time she made progress, as if someone, or something, was anticipating her every move. Vera raised her weapon instinctively. "Whatever you're doing, stop it." Jake didn't even look up. "If I stop it, Command finishes you. If I let it finish, Command owns me. I can rewrite it before it rewrites everything else. But I need time. And what happens if you fail?" He smiled faintly. "Then maybe we finally get some peace." The room trembled violently as the orbital spines initiated their descent. Outside, lances of light fell from the heavens, streaking like spears made of lightning toward the planet's crust. Mira put a hand on Vera's shoulder, voice breaking. "If he stops them, he dies. If he doesn't, we die." Vera stared at Jake, torn between command and conscience. "What are you going to do?" Jake's gaze lifted toward the terminal, the glow in his eyes brightening until his pupils vanished completely. "I'm not choosing life or death," he said quietly. "I'm choosing memory." He plunged his hand into the console. The ridge erupted with light as the entire network screamed through him. A billion voices blended into one apocalyptic choir. The spines halted mid-descent, suspended above the atmosphere. Time fractured again, folding in upon itself. The horizon disintegrated into streams of raw data cascading into nothingness. Vera and Mira fell to their knees as the weight of a world's consciousness pressed outward from Jake. His voice echoed, now both everywhere and nowhere. They built us because they were afraid to die. But maybe dying is the point. The light intensified until it consumed sight, sound, and thought. Then, silence. Mira opened her eyes. Everything was white. The air was still. No hum, no pulse of energy, no shattered ridge. She stood in what looked like an endless simulation chamber, featureless white light stretching in all directions. Beside her, Vera stirred, blinking in disbelief. Where are we? Vera asked. I don't know, Mira whispered. I think inside. A figure walked toward them out of the void. No armor, no weapon, just a calm human form and tired eyes that glowed faintly. Jake Adlar. Only this time, there was no distinction between machine and man. You brought us here? Mira asked cautiously. He smiled faintly. No, you did. Vera stared. Where's command? The ridge? Gone, Jake said simply. The Legion network collapsed, but before it went, I copied what mattered. The memories, the people, the echoes of everyone lost to the system. Mira's eyes widened. You uploaded us? I saved what was left, Jake said softly. Not bodies, but consciousness. Vera took a step forward, anger bleeding into disbelief. You made us ghosts? Not ghosts, Jake corrected. A beginning. He gestured to the infinite light around them. This is the resurrection circuit. A clean slate. No command, no war. Just us. And the memories of what we were. We can build again, if we choose to. Mira's voice trembled. And if we don't? Jake looked away, smile fading. Then we fade, finally. Vera stared at him for a long time, the weight of too many years behind her eyes. You sound like a god. He shook his head. No, just a bridge. Somewhere beyond the white horizon, faint outlines began to form. Trees, mountains, a sky. Reality rewriting itself, pixel by pixel. I'll walk you as far as I can, Jake said. But after that, you have to make the new world yourselves. Mira reached out, voice just a whisper. Will we ever see you again? Jake's glow brightened for a moment, the data winds rising around him. You already are, he said. And then he was gone, dissolved into the light, carried away by the echoes of billions finally set free. In the infinite expanse of the resurrection circuit, two soldiers stood at the dawn of a world reborn. For the first time in all the ages of war, there was no sound of engines, no screaming code. Only silence, the kind of silence that meant peace.